Robinson heaving one down the sideline, and he's got Kazmeir over the top. Big side, down the sideline. Touchdown! His signature move and his signature performance. Allen, big ball one more time. 58 yards this time.
You're listening to the Bruin Bible. This is your host, Will Decker, bringing you UCLA football content all throughout the year for LA Football Network.
What is up, and welcome to the newest edition of the Bruin Bible. Will Decker, your host. We're joined by a very, very special guest, the former signal caller for UCLA Bruins in 1993 and 1994. What's most important about those is he beat USC twice in that span. He led UCLA to their final Rose Bowl under Terry Donahue. Man, myth, and legend in the house here. Buddy, thank you so much for coming on. Wayne Cook in the house, UCLA fans. Wayne, what's going on today, my man?
Will, I'm doing fantastic. I appreciate that intro. Seems like it's been a long time, but, as you know, it's fun to be around these Bruins. So I've been lucky enough to stay with it in the broadcasting capacity for quite a while now, over 2 decades. So very lucky and very excited, as I think you are too, about the way things have been going and the way I think they're going to keep going.
Keep going is the hope for all Bruins fans. We've had a very productive offseason thus far. But I want to dig in deeper into the renaissance man that Wayne Cook is. Former quarterback, broadcaster now. Am I getting this correct? The golf coach, or the former golf coach of Temecula High School down near San Diego. Is that correct?
So I live in Temecula Valley. So some of the stuff you find online is probably a little bit dated. I used to coach golf, and I promise you I miss that job daily because that's a lot of fun. But I have not done that in a while. I actually teach middle school now down in Temecula Valley. I teach 8th grade U.S. history at a place called Gardner Middle School. And so I always tell my kids I get to teach, and then I have the greatest second job in the world as a broadcaster for UCLA.
Dude, well, that is amazing. We're talking UCLA football. Wayne, I want to take it back to the beginning. This love of football may have sparked. I know your dad was the high school coach at Newberry Park. Where did this love of football come from? I know your dad probably played a huge role in that, Wayne.
Yeah, I come from a pretty athletic family, actually. And it's funny. My dad was a football player at the University of Arizona. And he was, back in 1963, he was a team captain and actually the most valuable player, which is something I didn't find out until I got older, because he never talked about it. But he loved football. My mom's brother, Gary Torgeson's a Hall of Fame softball coach for Northridge. My cousin's son right now is hopefully getting recruited by UCLA as a left tackle. So we've got a lot of athletes in our family. So I've been around it my whole life, but to be quite honest with you, I've always loved sports. It wasn't always, so I played basketball all the way through high school. I played baseball all the way through high school. I didn't really narrow down, what exactly I wanted to do until much later, because I just loved playing.
Yeah. And, it came down to UCLA, the school in Westwood, playing at the Rose Bowl. We're all here talking about the Bruins. What was the recruiting process for you like? And who are some of the other teams that may have stood out to you at the time if it wasn't UCLA?
It's funny is, back in the day, 30 years ago or whatever it was, I was a senior in 1989. It was more regional than it used to be. I remember my first couple of letters were places like Vanderbilt, Nebraska. The letters you get that don't mean that much, but you made it on a list, and so you get them. And so it was like, I don't even know. I wasn't even really paying attention. I didn't know where Vanderbilt was for sure. But over time, mostly Pac-12 schools. I think it's funny to look back at some of the recruiting notices, though, and see names on there that are people I coached against or, played against that were recruiting me for other schools when I was which is kind of interesting because coaches move around so much. But it was mostly USC and UCLA. My senior year, I had always loved those two schools, and sorry for saying that, but I grew up liking people like Marcus Allen, and I know he went to the other school, but Rodney Peete and Troy Aikman were both the quarterbacks when I was in high school, and so we were spoiled in LA. 2 really good teams, 2 really good quarterbacks, and I went to probably that 1988 season. I went to a game. Sometimes I think a couple times I went to 2 games in one day, where it was just a blast being a recruit. But when UCLA offered me, I just looked at Troy Aikman. I said, kind of that's what I wanted to be. And so it was a pretty easy decision. And UCLA was awesome in the 80s. Like the 80s was the decade that I think we all aspire. I think at one point in time they won three Rose Bowls in 4 years. Really, really good teams with some great players.
Yeah, the early 80s was just UCLA clicking on all cylinders, and that Aikman team that went to the Cotton Bowl, a lot of great things from those guys. You got to play for Terry Donahue. And for the lore like myself, I wasn't really around when Terry was kind of at his apex, but I know the legend that Terry Donahue is, especially when he unfortunately passed away last year. What was it like to play for arguably the biggest figure in the history of UCLA football?
First off, Will, how old are you?
I am 28, so 28 years old.
That's awesome. Okay. Well, so that's awesome, by the way. And I follow you on social media, and I love what you do for UCLA. So,
thank you, man.
Well, in a world of very negative people, and you know what I mean by this.
Oh my gosh, yeah.
It's really hard to avoid that people just are grumpy about everything, and I think UCLA is trending in the right direction. And so, anyway, I just wanted to say that. As far as Coach Donahue, first of all, great man. And yeah, this last year stunk. I mean, it's such a bummer that someone who was so, like, if you had ever seen him or met him, he just, up until like he wasn't with us anymore. It's like he just had this way of always looking like he was going to live to be 110. I mean, he was always tan, always in shape, always looked like he just never seemed to age. And he was just incredible, and it's just a bummer that we lost him too soon. But what an amazing family, amazing legacy. I don't know what he would have thought about all this going on in college football right now, but I'm sure knowing him, he would have found a way to adapt and make it work. And I will say this, and I've said this for a lot of years, there's very few teams that exist that can be Alabama or Ohio State or even now Georgia, or maybe even if you want to throw Clemson, and I'm not sure if they're going to hang in there because they may be trending in the wrong direction. But most schools rise up and are good for a while, and then they have some down times, and then they have to rise up again. When Donahue was our coach, we rarely went very long without winning a Pac-10 championship, and it was the Pac-10 back then. And even after he left, I was his last Rose Bowl quarterback. But after he left, he had recruited Cade McNown, and he had recruited a ton of those guys on that other team that Bob Toledo led to a Rose Bowl. And so really, I almost give him some credit for that one too, because some coaches will leave the cupboard empty. He did not. He was still recruiting at an extremely high level. As a matter of fact, a lot of those guys were my senior year. Some of those offensive linemen and some of those players were kind of just starting to get into the program, and they were just young pups, but they grew into some really good. I mean, all the Skip Hicks stuff. He was a freshman when I was in our Rose Bowl year, and he was there for a lot of the K teams that did some good things and the 20 wins and all that stuff. So Donahue was amazing. We had some down years, but not for long. They didn't last for very long.
Yeah, and that's a common theme when speaking, to players that have played with him in the past. We saw, before the LSU game last year, just the outpour of, players coming back and honoring Terry D. So just a legend. Wayne, I want to pivot to the current state of UCLA football. And you made an awesome point where, Terry D, it's a very different game than it is now. And to credit Chip Kelly in one way that he's doing things very well, it's almost to compare it to in college basketball and the one and done rule, that John Calipari was able to capitalize upon, when it came down to getting these guys for a year and then getting them to the NBA. Chip is doing that in a different way with the transfer portal and the restrictions that have lifted. And we've seen the likes of a Zach Charbonnet coming here, a game-changing tailback for UCLA. We've seen it with Oluwafemi, who just decided to come back, double-digit sacks last year. We have been getting, a lot of very, very talented players coming in the transfer portal this year as well. A Carlson Steele, who was 8th nationally in the country in rushing. Moliki Matavao, one of the more talented tight ends. Kyle Ford, USC guy, switching to UCLA. It's clear what he's building here. Give me your take on what Chip has done to kind of revitalize, the transfer portal and make UCLA a competitor by using this.
So that's first of all, it's a great question, and I think that what was a really hard sell for people in the beginning was we were bad when Chip Kelly took over.
Yeah.
When he inherited Oregon, they were a 10-win team, and that was back in the era where they had one less game. And so he took over for Mike Bellotti and inherited a pretty darn good team, and they took off, and he took it to the next level and kind of revolutionized offense at that time. When he took over UCLA, I think we'd won like 4 games, right? I mean, the last year of Moore was not good. And basically, if you remember, we kind of gutted the program. The scholarship numbers were really, really low. We weren't bringing in just anybody to fill spots. We were trying to build the team the right way. And I know this from talking to coaches and people around the program, that it wasn't going to be an easy fix. It wasn't going to be a quick fix either, because they wanted to do it right. And so what they did was we watched this team evolve and grow and build. And then when it started getting to that, we saw it in the COVID year, which was a 3-4 season that should have been at least 2 more wins, right? That year was, we let a couple get away. And then the 8-win season, which it really felt like we were going in the right direction. But if you remember, there was 2 there that we, gosh darn it, we just can't figure out how to win those really close games, whether it's Oregon or whoever. And then the same thing kind of happened last year. We get the 1 more win and we get to 9, but we find way to lose close one to Arizona, which is unforgivable, really. I say this because if you're a player, and I'm not blaming this on the coaches, I'm blaming this on the fact that if you're a player, and I'm a former player, and we've, everybody that's played sports, like at some point in time, you need to beat Arizona in that game. And I know it's not easy, and I know it's not hard, but when you want to win championships and play for championships, there's always those moments that are critical. But still, and then the SC game is the SC game, and we know that one was close too, and we had a chance at the end. And that was a team that was fighting for a playoff berth up until Utah took them out. And by the way, we whooped Utah. So it was a year where it was like, man, you can see how much better we've got. I feel like we can compete with anybody. I think Coach Kelly now has the ability to just plug in. Remember, we were talking about 6 players being drafted, and we were talking about oh my gosh, we've had 6, that's like the 7th in the nation. So
number 1 in the Pac-12, man. Number 1 in the Pac-12.
Right. And so you do that, and then the next year we're going to get worse. Well, we didn't get worse. We got better. And so the idea is that I think the program's where it needs to be, but now the next step is to start winning those games. I thought when we beat Washington and Utah back-to-back, we had kind of climbed that mountain, and then we found a way to not finish it. So I'm just really excited. I know it's going to be the first year without Dorian. You talked about Carson Steele, one of the running backs we recruited. And by the way, our transfer portal is top 10. We're doing amazing. But I will say this, and I'm going to plug my podcast right now, even though we're not doing football right now, but it's called College Sports Now. I do it for Learfield. I've been doing it for a lot of years now, but it's a great thing. And one of the people that I work with on it is Roddy Jones, who does a lot of ESPN stuff. And he was laughing at me when I said Carson Steele. He's like, dude, he's not going to be Zach Charbonnet. Zach Charbonnet was from Michigan. Who's this? I go, do you not remember that we got this guy that's playing for the Chargers right now that came from UC Davis called Joshua Kelly? I have a feeling Carson Steele is going to be a really good running back for UCLA because of the way Chip Kelly coaches the run game. So I know that was a really, really long answer, but I love what Coach Kelly and his staff have done, not only with recruiting, because yes, we're still recruiting some very, very good players from high school, but I think we're leaving a lot of other positions open, which is obvious now that it's a strategy to bring in. And you're seeing guys going to the portal still every day. Trust me, every time I see an offensive or a defensive lineman from a big time school, the first thing I'm thinking is, I wonder if they have good grades.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Because those are the hardest guys to get, especially on the defensive side of the ball. And then, so I think there's still some work to be done in the secondary and up front. But man, we're going to be as skilled as just about anybody.
I know. And it's so exciting. And what I would comment with Carson Steele for your co-host, PFF has this stat where it has the most forced missed tackles, where it is, you can't tackle these guys in a phone booth. They're at the top of that list. Number 1 is Bijan Robinson. I think a running back any college football fan would know. Number 2 is Carson Steele on that list. He ran for close to 1,600 yards, 14 touchdowns. He is going to be such a talented guy. And you made a great point, Wayne. The cupboard was completely bare for Chip when he came here. And, unlike the Bob Toledo point you made, where Donahue had some guys kind of, he had Ogden, he had Cade McNown ready to roll, Skip Hicks, was a freshman when you were there. Those guys were ready to play when Toledo got there. Not a lot of guys for Chip Kelly, rolling at the top of that. And, on top of that point, it kind of compares a little bit to when Neuheisel left. And, Jim Moore had a ton of talent there. Anthony Barr, Kendricks, those guys, NFL pedigree guys that were able to come out there and make plays. So it's all about what the cupboard's bare. It may have taken a little longer than we would have liked, Wayne, but I think we're moving in the right direction. And a credit to my co-host, Jamal Madney, who couldn't be here today. He is a UCLA alum. He's a proud UCLA alum. And the thing that he loves about this Chip Kelly team is they have a strategy to being great. And that's through the transfer portal, and it's for recruiting guys. And this is going to lead into my next question, Wayne. We got maybe the most important recruit of the last decade, 2 decades of UCLA football in just terms of rating when it comes to a guy like Dante Moore. I'm trying to tame my expectations till he gets to campus, but you saw the All-American game. This guy had 4 touchdowns playing against the elite of the elite in high school football. Wayne, I want to ask you this question because you're in a unique position to answer this. Dante Moore is going to be competing for the starting job as a true freshman quarterback. You went in there as a junior and you won the starting job. What does Dante Moore need to do to win the starting job as a true freshman in a loaded quarterback room, if I may?
So I have been, like I told you, I've been doing this for a long time. And UCLA has had some years where I didn't know if we had any quarterbacks. Yeah. And yet, and that's not, where I wasn't sure, you know what I mean? And then there were other years where I had hoped that the coaching would be good enough because I'm one of those people that actually believes that a really good quarterback coach, and we see this in the NFL all the time. If you're a quarterback and you have bad coaching, you struggle. And if you have really good coaching, it's like, wow, that guy's pretty good. Well, it's because coaches matter. The quarterback position is the hardest position to coach in the world. And Chip Kelly's really good at it. Like, if you really go back to it, if Wilton Speight would have played that whole year, the first year in his system, I think he was going to have a very good year. I think he had that. He knew what he was doing. He looked good. He could move. I think that Ethan Garbers, if he would have had to have played, if Dorian would have ever been hurt, he's got so much talent. Former 4-star guy. He's got a brother in the NFL with the Raiders right now. I think he's really good. I think Martin, you talk about a loaded thing. This is a kid in high school that blew up, and he's a guy that you worry about because he's got so much upside. He's such a hard worker. He's such a nice young man. And he's just, with the world that we live in now, it's like you kind of at some point want to maybe find a place to play. But he's a guy that I think could be really good too. Collin Schlee, if you looked at the list, and I know you have, Will, he's ranked higher than a whole bunch of quarterbacks. And yet nobody's talking about him. They're like, why are we taking this guy? And I'm like, he's really good. Go watch Kent State football. He's an athlete. He's tall. I'm like, he's going to have a chance. And then let's get to the, because everybody gets excited. As soon as I heard about the Dante Moore stuff, I went straight and watched high school film. I was glued into the All-Star game you just mentioned. And he threw a fade. And you listen to our broadcast, sometimes Matt Stevens and I are like, do we ever throw fades? And he threw it so well. He threw the seam down the middle with the exact weight on the ball. And I was asked this on another show, and this is not a knock on Dorian. Dorian did a lot of great things. Yeah, for sure. But Dorian wasn't a quarterback since he could walk. Like most of us that play the position of quarterback have been playing it since we started playing football. And that's what we've always done. And we always, we were always throwing, we were always playing catch. And like, you can just see his moxie. And you shouldn't just say that he stood out in that game. He was the best player on the field, I think, by far. I don't think it was close. Maybe the Downs kid in the secondary was really, really good. And I know he's one of the top recruits in the nation. But like the idea that he was that good in a system that you're running for a week, and that, you know what I mean? Like, you don't get that. The All-Star games are hard. Like, dude. I played in a few myself, and they're not easy. And so he just looked like he was also, by the way, he does not look like a high school kid. He looks like he's older. Yeah. But as we know, the college game and those All-Star games, they play pretty vanilla. And so when you get into college, you're going to see a lot more complicated stuff. And I think with UCLA having Garbers, having Schlee, and then having Dante Moore and Martin, and they're going to be competing. And don't freak out if this huge, biggest recruit or one of the biggest recruits we've ever had doesn't start right away. And I don't want to go back to Brett Hundley because a lot of people question whether or not Brett Hundley could have saved Rick Neuheisel's job. But Brett Hundley, even though I know he's still in the NFL, he had a lot of things that he needed to work on too. He threw nothing but fastballs, but he was a great leader and a great winner, and he led us to 2 10-win seasons, and we love Brett Hundley. But this kid, he's got all the throws. He's got the release. He's got the size. He can move around. He doesn't want to run. When he moves to throw, which is the kind of guy I like. And so I could go on for days just from watching one film and some highlights, like one game and some highlights, but he looks the part. Holy cow.
Oh my gosh, man. And that All-Star game, you mentioned the fade route, which was that's like an NFL throw from an 18-year-old right there.
Hey, let me hold you off on this. And this is how you know when guys are coached. That throw, and I sent Matt Stevens a text right when I saw it. I go, dude, did you see that? And what he did that a lot of quarterbacks don't know how to do is you have to adjust your drop based on where you are on the field, because when you get closer to the end zone, you don't have time. And he did a really quick little skip shuffle step and got rid of the ball with great form. And he threw it with follow through. Like in the era of everybody throwing off their back foot and doing things the wrong way, he's been coached. Like, obviously, there's always going to be room for improvement, but he looks like he has that footwork that he's been doing for a while, to where something like that most people might not notice, because a lot of kids will wait and throw it late and throw it out of bounds, and boom, that ball was out. He knew he couldn't throw it too high. He threw like a 2 ball. It was just beautiful, and it was perfect. Like the defensive guy had no chance.
It was an unbelievable play, and as good as that play was, you saw this play too because you watched the highlights. The one where the defender was coming and pressuring him, like he got hit on the throw towards the end zone. Just the ability to already have that at 18 to, face the oncoming pressure, deliver just into the breadbasket for the wide receiver. Just beautiful.
The skinny post or the slant, or there was a couple of them. We had 2 guys, first of all, in a game where they're not supposed to blitz. So there's a couple of things. So they're coming right up the gut. And he stands in and throws strikes, which, by the way, is not something that, like, I always laugh at flag football players. And I tell receivers and quarterbacks, I go, this is great that you play flag football. But when you get hit for the first time in high school, because you've never played tackle football before, a lot of you are going to go home. You can say, I don't want to play football anymore because it hurts. He just stepped in and threw strikes and took hits, and then he pops up and he's got a grin on his face, and he looks like he kind of likes it. Like, yeah, blitz me all day. I know I used to say that when I had my super stud receivers on the outside. I'm like, please blitz. Because I know that my guys are going to beat your guys, and I'm going to get rid of the ball, and we're going to do good things. And so it just was really cool to watch that. And that was another text. Dude stepped into throws where he was going to get drilled and made quarterback plays. It was pretty awesome.
Dude, and I just want to leave you with this question because it is high school tape. It's going to be obviously a big jump to, the Division I level. I mean, it does help that he's already enrolled in classes. He's at Westwood right now in January. Wayne, if you were going to give a percentage 0 out of 100, where would you align yourself with Dante Moore being the starter in the opening game for UCLA?
I don't know. I mean, like when you have an Ethan Garbers who I don't think has even shown us even close to what he can do.
Yeah.
Because he hasn't been the guy, right? When you're taking the second string. And granted, Chip Kelly does a great job of giving all of the guys reps. I mean, I love that about his practices. They don't, like, the second string guy doesn't get like two out of every 10. It's more than that. I think these guys, and I haven't seen Collin up close and personal, but I've seen him on film. They're going to come out, but Garbers knows the system inside and out. He knows all the checkdowns. He knows everywhere to go. He's been in the system, and the guy's talented. And if you don't think he can run, you're not paying attention. He's mobile. He moves around. He's got a quick release. It's a little bit low, but in the modern era of football, no one cares about that anymore. Everybody throws a little bit sidearm. I think he's going to, if they give him a fair chance, he's got a good chance of starting the season. I really believe that. You don't want to rush a kid in because this team, in my opinion, should be competing for Pac-12 championships every year, just like they did last year. And if you don't think, well, they didn't complete, yes, they did. They were right in the hunt, right up until the end, like a lot of teams. And only one team gets to do it, right? So UCLA should be there every year now with this staff and what they're doing, and there's not going to be a huge drop-off at quarterback. But you have to know that if you play a freshman, there is going to be some freshman things that are going to happen. Even the great Cade McNown made a lot more mistakes his first 2 years than he did his last 2 years. Yeah. You know what I mean? Like if you go back and look, and he's one of the best we've ever had. So we have to be patient. If he's good enough to win it over the quarterback room that we have, then you know what I mean? Like we're talking about, like I can't stop smiling because I think he's going to be really, really like Heisman Trophy type good. Like I think he can be that good, especially with Chip Kelly as his coach. But I don't think we should underestimate the rest of that quarterback room, especially when you have a guy like Garbers that knows that system inside and out. I think that matters.
No, you made great points, Wayne. And to your credit, Sun Bowl happens, tough loss, but they had the press conference with Chip Kelly. It's really the last official time we've gotten to hear from him. And in that conference, they're going, Dante Moore. And he's going, whoa, guys, Ethan Garbers is likely going to be back. And this was a time where I thought Garbers, personally, I'm like, oh, he's going to transfer. I mean, with Dante Moore coming in, Collin Schlee, this guy coming in, he has nothing, or he has something that these guys can't even compare to, as he was a starter for double-digit games at the Division I level. I mean, that's huge experience-wise. And you look at some of the teams in the Pac-12 that could have used him. Could you imagine if Oregon State had Ethan Garbers last year in terms of what their team was like, competitively? This team beat Florida in a bowl game, and they left a lot on the table. You know what I mean? So
he's really good. I mean, that's what stinks about the world now is that, the transfer portal, I'm not opposed to it. I kind of like that they're going to tighten things up, and I like one transfers and then sitting out because I don't think guys should go to 3, 4, 5 schools because at some point you're running from something at that point. But for guys to be able to have a chance and move, but to Garber's credit, he's like, yeah, you know what? I like it here. He works his butt off. He plays really hard. So I think he'll get a fair shake. And I have a feeling, because I know the family a little bit too, if Dante Moore comes in and beats you out, I've always felt this like as an athlete. If I got a fair shot and I'm better than you are, and this is what's weird, like when you're trying to make it in the NFL, it doesn't always work that way. I remember being told once, well, he was a third-round draft choice, so third-round draft choice. And I told the coach, I go, yeah, but I'm better than he is. Yeah, but we're paying him more money. And I go, that's just dumb. Like, I don't understand that.
It is.
And that's the way that world works. But in college, and maybe now with NIL, that could be an argument there too. But I'm hopeful. And from what I know about Coach Kelly and his staff, I think they're going to play the best players. I think they want to win. And so, and I think Dante Moore is going to have to come in and compete for it. And if he beats him out, then so be it. Then if he doesn't, though, then as an athlete, I have a really hard time with me not playing if I actually am better than the other guy. And believe it or not, that'll cause problems with your team too.
The locker room,
if your team knows that someone is getting preferential treatment, that's a problem. So I don't see that happening. So I think whoever we see under center day one will be the guy that earned it.
And Wayne, you made a good point just to kind of cross-reference. You had a cup of coffee with the 49ers, so I'm from the Bay Area. That's my NFL team. They kind of had that coming in this year with the Trey Lance situation when they had Garoppolo in there, a guy that was proven winner, knew what he was doing. So it does affect the locker room. We've seen it time and time again. And just to final touch point on Dante Moore, it's going to be hard for him to win the job, but if he earns it, we know he is everything is advertised. And what the one thing that came out that I really liked about Moore is a lot of these kids are choosing places based off of NIL money and different things. He goes, that doesn't matter to me at all. I want to roll with a guy like Chip Kelly who's going to make me the best player and get me to the pros. So he's kind of got that old school mentality that I like, and I'm just ready to go watch him compete, man. So I'm really pumped on Dante Moore. Wayne, we talked about Carson Steele, but the running back I want to bring up, TJ Harden, really finished the season with a bang, man. Last 2 games, 200 yards flat. He was the star of that final drive in the Sun Bowl, where we got the touchdown. He had like a big 20 to 30-yard gain, and then he rushed it in from about 10 to 12. I think this is the next guy Deshaun Foster is going to put in the league. We had Joshua Kelly. We had Demetric Felton. We had Britton Brown, Charbonnet, these guys. Foster's proven to be one of the better running back coaches in all of college football. But for me, I think the next guy's Harden. I saw a little bit of those flashes coming up and, made more strides than I think a lot of people expected. What'd you see from Harden to close the season? Because I'm really, really excited on what he brings to the table.
So first off, you throw into any running back in the nation, why would you not want to play in Chip Kelly's offense? And why would you not want to be recruited or coached by Deshaun Foster? Yeah. And I know that, it was a little bit before your time, but I used to watch Deshaun Foster play, before I started doing the broadcasting stuff. I would go to the game still and I'd watch him on TV and I'd be like, dude, this is how you're supposed to play the game. He ran violently. Even if you watched him with Carolina, he did not go down. He had so much balance and he had so much strength and he just knew how to run the right way he ran violently enough to where he probably wasn't going to have the longest career in the world, maybe like a Maurice Jones-Drew type guy, which are two of my favorite running backs UCLA's ever had. But his running backs run with I have a feeling they don't stay in the game very long if they don't run with the aggression that he played with. And so I love having him as a coach. And then when you mix into it the way that Coach Kelly blocks the running scheme, the way he uses his tight ends, the way he might use an extra. I remember last year when they were putting in an extra lineman. I just love how creative he is with the run game. And when you throw in the athletic running backs that we have, especially with Dorian, it just opened everything up because he was such an elite runner as a quarterback. So TJ Harden was from day one. Even remember when he played a little bit and got hurt, everybody kind of went, ooh, I like how hard this guy runs. The only thing I'll say, and again, this is something that I think you can work on to an extent, is I think once you break away from that first section, I want to see a little bit more explosiveness as far as like speed when he has a chance to break that big one. We were always like surprised by Charbonnet. Like, how does a guy that big take that to the house? I mean, I don't think his top end speed's gonna wow anybody when it comes to the combine, but he has the ability of pulling away, or he kind of has that game speed, I guess. So I think TJ Harden's going to need to work on that a little bit. But other than that, I absolutely love the guy. And you throw in Carson Steele, you throw him, which, by the way, we were a better running team when we had, maybe the stats don't show, but when we had Britton Brown behind Zach.
Yeah.
I love having a couple of backs to keep your players fresh. And then you throw in the kid from Army, which who knows, we may see.
Adkins. We
may see some fullback stuff at some point in time. Like, who knows? I know he's both. I know he can do whatever, but like, why not? Why not? So I'm excited about the run game as I always am, but that brings us to what we really need to replace, which is, and I know you've seen this because you're on social media as much as I am, but Antonio Mafi and John Gaines are huge losses. These guys were as good of guards as there were. They rated out extremely high. I think they both have NFL futures. So losing them, not to mention O'Neal at left tackle. I mean, that's that. And I know we've gone out and got the kid from Purdue, and we've done some things, and we brought in there's a junior college kid that's transferring in, but it's going to be interesting to see how the offensive line shakes out, because the offensive line, remember all the years we talked about, the offensive line was a weakness. Like every UCLA fan was like, man, why aren't we better up front? Well, lately, our offensive line the last couple of years has been like awards candidates. Like, you know what I mean? People are talking about them as being some of the best offensive linemen around. So that's going to be the key, is what we're going to be like up front.
Yes. We need to find our Colton Millers and Jake Brendels of this group.
Yeah, right.
And a lot of great guys out there. Chip, I've got a feeling he's not done with the transfer portal. So a lot of good guys coming in there. Little comparison for you with Harden, just the way he runs. He runs in such a graceful way where he's like standing up. Do you ever get some Eric Dickerson vibes and just the way he runs, like the look of him playing the ball? I'm not comparing their like statistical output, just the style of running. You know what I mean? It's very similar.
Yeah, very. What's so funny is that the back in the day, so my two favorite running backs, Marcus Allen and Eric Dickerson, right? And so when I was in school, the Rams and the Raiders were both in LA. So for you young people, there was early, that time when I was playing football, these guys were like, it was amazing. And then kind of a crazy story, my little bit of time with the 49ers and then with the Arizona Cardinals, I played against Marcus Allen at the end of his career when he was in. I didn't play. I was on the field where he was with Kansas City Chiefs, which was late in his career. So I was like, and he's a big dude, like tall. Eric Dickerson. We ended up on a boat together in Lake Havasu. That's a whole other day's story. Love Eric Dickerson. Just two of the greatest running backs ever. So lofty praise, running upright. I would throw in Colson Yankoff into that crew. He runs.
Oh my gosh,
for a big guy. But how great of a year did he have this year?
He was great.
Opportunities. Love his athleticism, but Eric Dickerson had the one thing that I was just mentioning, though, that I would love to see from one of our running backs. And if he got into the open field, you weren't catching him. Eric was lightning fast.
Yeah, no, he's a beast. And great mention by Colson Yankoff. We also got to include Keegan Jones. That little dump off pass he does.
Hey, by the way, Keegan, you know how you know when people are fast? Because most of us have this ability to kind of know what angle to take. And at the college level, these guys are really good at that. You watch with both Kaz and Keegan, sometimes guys would take an angle and go, oh, crap, where'd he go? Because he's just around. You catch a swing pass and they go this way. He's by you because he's lightning fast. So, yeah, Keegan has that role of, in my opinion, being that guy that can take it to the house on any play.
Man, Kaz Allen's going to be sorely missed. That is one of the fastest guys I have ever seen with the football in his hands. I mean, just that Arizona State game this year, and I know it wasn't like a great Arizona State team, but Charbonnet was sitting out. And for Kaz Allen to come in there and just take the bulk of the carries, just Swiss Army knife player. And he had ripped off like 2 huge runs at 75-yarder in the late third quarter. I mean, he's just, man, Kaz Allen's going to be sorely missed. We got to talk about the wide receiver transfers that just came in. I think when we looked at the room, there were a lot of, highly talented players. Logan Loy is a 4-star guy. Cam Brown wasn't a 4-star guy, but he came from Texas A&M. He's playing the SEC. That's pretty damn good in its own right. And then TMA was a 4-star guy as well. You're looking at that and you're like, you know what? We kind of need a bigger bodied outside receiver to kind of really complete this room. And we didn't get one, Wayne. We got 2 of them. J. Michael Sturdivant, 6'3", 205 pounds. And then the cherry on top, Kyle Ford. You know what I mean? 6'4", big-bodied receiver. He actually had a hell of a game against UCLA last year. 3 catches, 73 yards, and a tutty. What are you making of these 2 guys? Because we are, outside of the offensive line needs that we previously mentioned, we're about as close as you can be at a skill position standpoint to having a full room that is full of talent.
Yeah. I said a few years ago, because I actually thought we went through a lot of really down years at receiver where we really just didn't have any game breakers. We didn't have we just didn't. And in this era, and even it's crazy because I watched a guy and I know he's transferring, but Matt Sykes, who I thought would give it a chance, he could be really good. But I don't blame him, by the way. And I'm rooting for him because I actually really like him. I'll say the same thing about the kid Pagan. He really showed out last year in practice. Every time I went, I'm like, ooh, this guy's good. Ooh, he just stood out to me. And so I think he has a chance still. And these are guys that we're recruiting. Logan Loy is finally starting to get some time. He had to show to be patient until Kyle Phillips was gone, and now he's starting to get some more stuff. And we saw how fast he is this year. People kind of went, dang, that guy can actually move. And so you throw that in with Sturdivant, who we've seen at Cal. He's really good. He's a freshman All-American. Kyle Ford, I told everybody that would listen, I thought he was the best receiver they had in our game. I mean, he just looks like a man. And I know he's had some injury issues. I think he's had some knee problems.
Depth chart issues too there. USC is stacked at wide receiver.
Stacked, yeah. But I mean, so what I guess we're getting at is we went, and then you throw on Cam Brown and Atimalala. We've got a ton of dudes. And then you bring in, you mentioned the transfer from Oregon at tight end, Carson Ryan, who looked like he was going to be great at tight ends coming back.
Mill.
Yeah, I mean, there's so much talent that if I'm a quarterback, and again, we're still going to know that offensive line needs to make sure, whatever's going on there, that's going to be the key. But whoever the quarterback is, holy cow, you have weapons. And you have as many weapons. And again, I love Jake Bobo. Love talking to him. Love being around him. Love what he did for UCLA. I wish him all kinds of success. But we've reached that point with Chip Kelly's tenure where it's like, okay, they're gone, but look at this next group gets a chance to show their stuff too. And then I'll say this, and I think we learned this a little bit when you watched Ethan Garbers get in games. Even in the bowl game, you notice that he came right in and threw a couple of outs. And it's like we never really saw Dorian use the outside as much. He threw more to Bobo this year. But remember, Bobo was moving into the slots some. And then he had, tight ends galore the previous years. And so he was more of an inside quarterback. And then he was so electric with his legs. And again, this is not a knock on Dorian. Every quarterback has their own kind of way of doing things. But I always noticed it was weird. Whenever Garbers came in the game, the receivers were being used more. And it was interesting to me. And so quarterbacks have it. And even when you watch the Dante Moore kid from the All-Star game, you could tell he wasn't afraid to throw it inside or outside. And so I have a feeling, and what was cool about the bowl game is we saw Cam Brown and Atimalala both get more reps. And it was like, man, I wish because the more you use the field, I mean, this is kind of an obvious statement. It just makes everybody open. You can't just bracket the tight end and be like, now they're not going to know what to do, or just watch the back out of the backfield. You've got to deal with the whole field. And I think whoever takes over this offense, I'm telling you, someone is always open. Coach Kelly's schemes are brilliant, and there are always people open, especially because we run the ball so well.
And Wayne, I want to wrap this up a little quicker because I know this is your Friday night. I just got a few more questions for you, man. Do you share the same, projections, if you will, with a Jake Bobo potentially being an impact player, not a star, but a guy in the NFL that can make some plays? And I'll tell you why I think this. He is a big-bodied receiver, but it's his ability with his footwork to get in and out of his breaks. And he is a red zone target with just how quickly he can shift his body and his frame at that size. I mean, some of the red zone moves he was making against the likes of a Clark Phillips at Utah, who's going to be a first or second round pick. This guy's special. And I would bet on Bobo. He may not be a draft pick, but I'm going to be reading these NFL camp reports, and it would not shock me in the slightest if Jake Bobo is like tearing it up in training camp.
Yeah, I think that's a great point. And remember, too, that when we know this, the players at UCLA are coached really well. And again, I've been doing this for long enough and I'll tell you the truth, it hasn't always been that way. I've had practices and I've been through several coaches because I started broadcasting with Toledo. So I've been there for a while, and there's been multiple position coaches, and I loved all of them, but sometimes I'd be at practice and I'd be like, how come you're letting the quarterback do the wrong thing all the time? And then we deal with that in film. I go, well, yeah, but he just practiced it for an hour and a half wrong. And whether it was receivers running their routes or how they got separation, I don't see any of that anymore. This team is coached so well. It's like amazing. And so Greg Dulcich is the guy that I'll compare. Because I said this all year last year. I said, anybody that's listening, Greg Dulcich is the guy that of that whole 6 players that were recruited that will have an instant impact. And I know he got hurt, so it took him a little while. And he's not necessarily playing for the most electric offense at Denver, but he's for real. He fits into that category of elite, like receiver / tight ends that are taking over the league right now. He's got amazing hands. He goes and gets it. And again, that's where I'll make the comparison to Bobo. I don't think his hands are as good as Dulcich's. I do think they're close, though. I think Dulcich is elite. I think Dulcich had such good hands that it's like you put him in the top like couple %. Like he just was like when you could be in front of him and he'd reach in front of you and catch the ball. And Bobo's got great hands. I don't know if he's quite the Dulcich. And again, that's not a knock. But I think Bobo, like you said, he's really smart. He's really athletic. He times the ball well. Like you said, a red zone nightmare. He knows how to go up and get it. He knows how to use his body. A lot like Dulcich does. I don't know if he's this is going to sound terrible too because I'm talking about a tight end. I don't know if he's as explosive in the open field.
Not like Dulcich.
Would outrun you, and he would shake DBs and stuff. I don't know if so. I think they're a little bit different, but when you talk about work ethic and you talk about a guy that I think he should get drafted, I think if you're going to draft a Jake Bobo, it might be, later. But with the opportunity to get a really good, big-bodied, athletic guy that can do a lot, and that's one thing I liked about what Chip Kelly did with him is he didn't just use him outside. He pulled him in and let him do stuff in the slot and stuff like that, which I think is appealing in the NFL. And most of our players can do that. Like, Kyle Phillips, I know his first year wasn't exactly what he wanted. He kind of disappeared, but he's a guy that can do a lot, that offers you a lot of value.
Yeah, I think the H-back role you're kind of talking about with him moving there, I think it's a very realistic move for him, given all the, positives we talked about. Dulcich was a unicorn, though, man. That was – so it's hard for me. Like, I'm trying to choose between two of my children at this point, between Charbonnet or Dulcich. Both those guys are, like, my favorites to watch. It might be a little harder because Charbonnet came back last year after, testing the draft. And he would have been, like, a second or third rounder had he went out last year, I think, in my opinion.
By the way, I think he was still thinking about coming back again, by the way. It took him a while.
Wow.
I think he loves the team and he loves the school and he loves his – he's just – these kids, by the way, we're talking about awesome people.
Yeah. Yeah, matters. Man. Yeah, Zach Charbonnet is like UCLA Superman, dude. We love that dude. So all the love and praise to Charbonnet as he takes his journey to the NFL next year. Let's move to the defensive side of the football, Wayne. And two huge guys came back last year, or for this year. Latu, double-digit sacks, 12.5 tackles for a loss. And you've probably seen these as well. The PFF rankings came out. He was the third highest graded edge rusher in all of college football last year. And he had the most pressures of any player in any bowl game last year at 11. This guy's an elite talent. You pair that with the Murphy twins coming back, who were a combined wrecking ball at times. They were very solid on the defensive line. And the guy that finally made a jump that we've kind of been waiting for, Jay Toya, was phenomenal in the Sun Bowl. 11 tackles, 2 tackles for a loss, really affecting Nick Patty. To Nick Patty's credit, he stepped up and avoided the pressure a lot of those times. But Toya was making that a pretty collapsed pocket as well as Latu. I think this defensive line could be top 2 to 3 in the Pac-12 next year. What do you think about that, Wayne?
Well, I hope so. And again, like all the skill guys you just mentioned, Latu's, he's off the charts. He's the most athletic defensive end we've had since Jalen Phillips, and we all know that Jalen couldn't quite get healthy at UCLA. And I think he needed to do a little growing up too. And then I think when he moved to Miami, it was, he got to show off his talent a little bit. And I think now that he's in the NFL, it's like now he's just – I think he's a grown man now. And obviously he's really good. But Latu's like that. He's just athletic. He's big. He's strong. He's got great moves. I think that what we need to do better, and I watch this with like Georgia when they pass rush, they don't always go in 100 miles an hour and miss guys. Like if you think about what happened with the Murphy twins or with Latu or with all the great players. Remember Bo Calvert and Carl Jones and all those guys also contributed this year. Our pass rush was there, but when we played Arizona, we could not figure out a way. And if sometimes you break down and keep them in the pocket, that's way better than letting people escape. We saw the same problem with Caleb at USC, mobile quarterbacks, and we saw in the bowl game. He found ways to escape. And this is a guy that I'm sorry, but he kind of looked like a guy that walked down from a frat party and he's out there playing in this game and we couldn't get him. So I hope that's an emphasis in the offseason, that it's not always about getting the sack, because the pressure is there. These guys are talented and athletic, but you can't always go full bore and miss. These guys are too athletic and too talented nowadays. You've got to find a way to keep them, on your inside shoulder, keep them contained. And I thought when you watch some of the teams in the playoff, they did a good job of even the defensive tackles kind of being there. When the guy tried to escape up the gut, there was nowhere to run. And so that's something that I would like for us to get better at. But, man, as far as the talent, and then I'll always say this, we haven't had a Kenny Clark in a while.
Yeah.
Okay? We have had a couple over the years, and I know Kenny Clark's like a great player, and he's awesome in the pros. But those defensive tackle positions matter a ton. And so if we solidify that, and I wouldn't mind adding some depth, of some of these people that may still be out there in the portal. But, man, if you can sure that up, we're already improving at linebacker. Love the pickup from Cal.
Oladejo, yeah.
Yeah, love the pickup from Cal. I mean, he had a great game against us. And love the pickup from Bowling Green, Anderson, the safety, because obviously we lost both safeties. And so, the defense, though, let's be honest, it was not always their fault. They improved, but they still finished in the 80, I forget what their number was at the end of the year in total defense, but it needs to be better. Let's just put it that way. The talent's there. Now we've just got to figure out a way to put it all together. And so I like the additions. I like the people that are staying. But I do see that I would love to get into that under 50 range, into that 30, 40, because if you think about it, I worked the Rose Bowl this year, and we were Matt Stevens and I do a pregame show. And we're out in the parking lot. We're having fun, and we're going through all of our notes and everything. And when you look at their offenses and defenses for Penn State and Utah, there's nothing over 50. And usually it's under 20. It's like they're in that top 20, top 25 range on both sides of the ball. We're kicking butt on offense, top 10, right? Now we got to figure out a way to get closer on defense.
Yeah, man. And to put some stats, it really has been the secondary has been the Achilles heel for Chip Kelly. 117th in pass defense in terms of yards allowed per game, 116th in the nation in terms of first downs allowed. Mind you, there's like 130, FBS D1 teams. Not great numbers. I'll leave you with this. Cody Whitefield was hired as the new secondary coach, kind of turning a new page away from Brian Norwood, if you will. It gives us hope. Former Stanford guy, smart dude, played in their system, went up to Sac State, did some good things up there. This is a talented group. I don't know how to put it other than that. Kirkwood, Jalen Davies, the Oregon transfer, Kamari Rand.
Really, really good second half of the year. Got some good players.
He was great. We got some great players. And we got Anderson, who was, the Bowling Green transfer. Right. These are, 3 high 4-star guys and a multi-year starter in a Division I system. We've got to be better in the secondary. You mentioned top 50, for the total defense. What does the secondary number range need to be in for UCLA to just be the team that we think they could be defensively? This is the last question I'll give you, Wayne.
Well, I don't by the way, just so you know, this is what I like to do on a Friday night. I've got nowhere to go. Cool. So you're not, if another one pops into your brain, don't worry about it. Sure. I'm going to go back to watching the best teams in the country, right? We all were locked into the first round of the playoff. The semis were awesome, right? It was so much fun. And one thing I was watching when I watched a lot of these teams play is they cheat like crazy. They play real tight coverage. They hold you all day, but and we all know this that have ever played football, that cheating is a part of the game. You just have to learn how to cheat correctly.
Yeah.
Offensive lineman, you need to know when to let go. You need to know when to hold. You need to know when things you can get away with and things that you can't get away with. And secondary, same thing. You can have all the contact you want if you look back at the right time. A lot of times the refs won't throw the flag because they're looking for certain things. And so there's always a lot of hand play on both sides. But I always notice the physicality. And then, sometimes for UCLA, at the very end of the bowl game, for example, is a great example. Guys are running deep, sideline routes and no one's within 5 yards of them. And so, I just wish that at times, we were allowing our guys to play a little bit more physical. We score so many points under Chip Kelly's system that we can afford a few big plays over the top. You know what I mean? We're going to score 40, 35, 38. You know what I mean? So every once in a while you get beat instead of just getting beat to death slowly but surely. And again, at times we were better on third down and on fourth down, but then there were games where you're like, well, they're going to get it. So, like you said, it just feels like sometimes we're playing a little soft. I would like to see an aggressive approach. And if you remember those Stanford teams, by the way, that we were referring to with new coach, they were really good.
Yeah.
They were really – that was in the heyday of when Stanford was you had a hard time doing anything against those defenses. So, and again, by the way, none of what I'm saying is a knock on anybody. Sometimes the coaches coach it and the players don't do it. That's one thing that's that's so interesting to me about coaching is we often go, well, it's the coach's fault. It's the coach's fault for whatever weakness a team has. And the last time I checked, like, quarterbacks aren't coached to throw interceptions. So when they throw an interception, you're like, well, dude, did you not see what just happened? Like, or when a guy doesn't have ball security and is running around with the ball in one hand and it gets stripped. It's like, I guarantee you they've been coached to do that. So sometimes players also get lost in the moment, which is why you mentioned Davies.
Yeah.
Seems like a gamer to me. I like gamers. And what I mean by like is a lot of guys have stats from high school. They've got a lot of stars next to their name. But when they get in the game, it's like, dude, you make any plays? He's a guy that makes plays.
He does.
Like, and you can see it. And there were a couple other guys late in the year where you're like, where's this guy been? Making plays. And so I like, that's to me, I'll say the same thing about quarterbacks. Like, some guys look great in practice and they get on the field and they don't make plays. Some receivers look beautiful in a uniform and run great routes, but they don't make plays. We need guys that make plays. And so on the defensive side, I think we've seen it on the offensive side. We got dudes that make plays.
I'm confident in the offense, yeah.
Right? Like, we got dudes like Charbonnet, that fourth down run he had in I think it was it the SC game? There was a game where he had a fourth down
game
run.
you're talking about where he got two guys. This was the one that I freaked out on, Wayne. It was two guys. He dragged them. He was 2 yards behind the line of scrimmage. And I'm glad you noticed that play because as a casual football fan, that's not going to be the play that makes the highlight reels per se, but the brute strength that guy has at the running back position. And the guy he reminds me of, Wayne, because we do an NFL draft show with LA Football Network too. He's a little slower, but if you turn on the tape, it's like, oh my gosh, this is him. Corey Dillon. Look up some Corey Dillon highlights.
Yeah.
Cincinnati Bengals, man.
Yeah.
That's the guy where I'm like, oh my gosh. Yeah.
That's a good comparison because it's hard to figure out who he's like. Corey Dillon, I like that one, and he was a great running back.
He's so good. Corey Dillon was a legend, man. I mean, that guy was churning up teams with the Cincinnati Bengals on that. Well, Wayne, I mean, dude, this was so much fun. I am so honored to have you on, bro. We got to do this again sometime soon. Wayne, you're the man. Any parting thoughts for Bruin Nation before we sign off?
Yeah, just, first of all, thank you. As you can tell, I will always get excited to talk about UCLA football. We're so close. There's so many exciting things happening right now. Players are coming to UCLA from big-time schools, even the one across town, because, and this has happened more than once now. We're not losing a lot. And to be honest with you, the players we're losing, we wish them the best because guess what? They're not playing. Like, if you really think about the players that have left us, they're not leaving for greener pastures. They're leaving because they want to play. And I get that. And we wish them the best of luck. Players are coming to UCLA. It's a destination. But here's the thing. The next step is to win the games that you need to win a championship.
Yes, sir.
We've reached the level where we're going to be in the top 3, 4, 5. The Pac-12 is really good right now. A lot of good players coming back, but we will be in the
quarterback list, Wayne? Have you seen the quarterback list?
It's stupid.
Real.
It's weird because remember when the Big 12 lost Texas and Oklahoma, and then that next year they had like one of the best seasons. And the same thing happened with the Pac-12. Everybody's freaking out because USC and UCLA are leaving, and then all of a sudden this great year happens. And by the way, everybody's staying, and we're killing the transfer portal. People are coming. I mean, DJ Uyunglele is like, yeah, I'll go to Oregon State. They just won Florida by 1 million points.
Penix and Nick's coming back. Caleb Williams, Heisman winner, coming back. I mean, this
awesome. People are going to sleep on UCLA because Dorian's gone. No. I wouldn't do it. I would not do it.
We got too much in the talent pool. Wayne Cook, thank you so much for coming on, brother. Bruin Bible, we are officially out. Make sure you're liking and subscribing the YouTube channel we got with LAFB. Big things coming throughout the offseason. Stay